Okay, our panel today, Coach Joe Gubernot, Coach Joe Bordell, and Coach Joe Klebon. Three legends at Shamokin Area High School, one from Cole Township, and we're going to talk about the history of sports in Shamokin with a focus on Shamokin area athletics. Talk to us a little about Cole Township and the transition from Cole Township to Shamokin High School.
When I was a kid growing up in Ferndale, Cole Township football was the thing in our area. I used to walk down and stand on the bank of the mountain and watch the games when I was a kid. And then when I got old enough and proceeded to go to Cole Township High School and played quarterback. My coaches was Ed Binkowski and Bernie Romanowski, two legends. We played Friday nights. Shamokin played Saturday afternoons. As a kid growing up in Ferndale, Saturday afternoon out playing and doing whatever, I'd hear the loudspeaker at Kent Memorial. I knew the game was going to start. So me and a couple of buddies, we'd run down over the hill and we'd sneak under the fence and go in and watch Shamokin play football. They would play Mount Carmel on Thanksgiving Day, every Thanksgiving, and it was a day game. At Cole Township, we played Shamokin and Mount Carmel, but never on Thanksgiving. But my senior year in high school, we played Shamokin like game 3 or 4. It was the first night game at Kent Memorial. And that's what Hoagie Harold was playing for Shamokin. And Rich Lichter was the quarterback. And games Friday night was so big in the Cole region. Mount Carmel, Shamokin. Back in the day, Coltmont had a team. Mount Carmel did. Mount Carmel Township. The rivalries were very bitter. I can remember in high school, the Cameron Bank up there, the students from Cole Township go up and beat SHS on the Cobank. And then the next morning you get there and the SHS was erased and somebody would put in CTHS. And that was an ongoing thing for years and years. There'd be a lot of tomato throwing at the cars. And in fact, when I was in high school, I was dating a girl up on Marshall Street by where the Jeremiahs lived. And I parked my car there, and Brian and Keith would kill my car. It was the Shamokin week. They had tomatoes and they had chalk and they got me every year.
Well, that's not too bad for that. If that's all he did,
Yeah, that's all he did. No, they didn't key it or any of that. No.
But I mean, but that was so, like,
But it was
you talk about, being at your girlfriend's, but imagine when we were growing up, I remember leaving games and the coaches would say, put your helmets on. We're leaving town. They're going to be throwing rocks and
Canada.
horse chestnuts and everything else. The students, that was kind of a tradition, not a good tradition, but nonetheless a tradition. Joe, why don't you talk to us a little bit about the transition from after the jointure? You had 1 year at Shamokin High School and then it went to Shamokin Area High School.
You really aren't aware of what's going on with the workings behind the scenes with school boards. You don't really know, or it doesn't register that you're going to be merged as a Shamokin Greyhound student and athlete with Cole Township. You're really not going to know Cole Township kids because you're not going to be hanging out. I'm from Rock Street. That's up over that way. My homestead was a half a block up the street from a big mill, which today is the Lawton Schroyer swimming pool, the Lawton Schroyer Memorial Swimming Pool. So you don't know Township kids. You don't. We're doing our wrestling with 40 kids at the Shamokin Greyhounds. It was jumping at the time. So you make your way through 9th grade with a couple JV matches, and pretty soon it's the end of school and it's the summer. And then all of a sudden, there's talk of these kids from the other end of the community that are going to come and be your contemporaries, the students in your classroom with you. And finally, it hit me like that summer, because my friends, were talking about it, and we're going to have kids in those classes we don't know. And, what kind of kids are from Cole Township? Are we going to like them, not like them? Are we going to beat them up because we don't like them? And what are we going to do here? So here we are. I never left the school, and the academy was still around, which was right next to the parking lot up here on 8th Street now. And the high school was intact. Everything the two buildings were connected by the famous tunnel. And you walk through that tunnel every single day. You had classes in the academy, you had classes in the high school. These new foreigners were in your classes. You got to know, because it's alphabetical order. Nobody knows how smart you are, how dumb you are, you know, what you're good at, what you're not good at. So you're in there with guys that you never saw in your life. And so, you know, there's a feeling out process. You're going to gravitate to the kids that you grew up with, that you went to school with. But the transition for me, and not for everybody, but for me, I truthfully have to say, was pretty smooth.
You said when you were in junior high, you had 40 wrestlers in the Shamokin High program. What were the numbers like in the athletic programs after the jointure?
4. I mean, I only go with wrestling. I'm too little to play football. The first year, practice starts early November, like just when basketball starts, Joe.
The first, it would have been the first back in those days, because that's what the starting, the first, yeah.
There was 45 to 50 kids in the room after the merger. Do you want to know after the merger? After 2 weeks, guess how many kids are in the room? 30. They know I'm not going to be making it here. It's going to be a lot of practicing, and I'm not going to be getting upstairs making a lineup. So, you know, they drop by the wayside. I don't know if that happened in basketball, but we'd lose in November. We'd lose, if there was 45, we'd lose by December 1, 15 kids. Then it was 30. And then you know how anything else is, Frank. At the end of the season, with 2 weeks to go, you probably have 16 to 17 in there, because it's only kids that are going to be wrestling in the sectional tournament that need to be there. The rest of them disappear. Whether they let it or not, I don't know. But and Cole Township wasn't good in wrestling. They just were not.
Do we have to get out of the building or what?
What was a football roster like in 1966?
I'm going to guess at the beginning of the jointure, they probably would have maybe 90 to 100 football players. A lot of people were always said, the jointure, nobody's going to be able to beat Shamokin Cole Township. They were very successful, but they didn't win any championships. They didn't lose many games, but they didn't win any championships, which would hurt them. At the same time, though, Mount Carmel was joining with Coatmont. And the Coatmont kids were a big part of Mount Carmel's success. And Shikellamy now, Sunbury, was now joining with Northumberland. And so those 3 jointures occurred, and Shikellamy and Mount Carmel had success winning championships. Shamokin kind of didn't until Tim Montgomery came.
Beaners was the first coach.
Beaners was the first coach at Shamokin. Joe Strunk was the JV coach in basketball. Probert became the Shamokin basketball coach.
As they did things back then, they were pretty specific. So, you know, obviously the school was called Shamokin, but the colors were purple and white for Cole Township.
I think they kind of compromised.
A little give and take.
Yeah.
Well, Shamokin area, Frank.
Shamokin area, yeah.
Some people, if you don't put the area in there, they get a little, young people.
Sure. Back in the day when the jointure in football, there would be people who would actually count when the kids on the field, how many Shamokin kids were on the field and how many Cole Township kids were on the field. And Beaners and Bernie had to answer to that all the time.
I would think in wrestling it was probably straight Shamokin.
It was straight Shamokin. I don't even know. I think it was Joe Cawthorn, but I wasn't even aware who was the Cole Township head.
Yeah, Joe Cawthorn. He was a guidance counselor.
And Mel Paul was retiring. He retired.
First years after the jointure, Mel Paul coached how many years?
I don't know, Frank. It's an interesting point here. Would he have continued to coach, Mel Paul we're talking about, if at the time administrators were still allowed to be head varsity coaches of whatever sport we're talking about? If you went into administration, and he did, he had his principal's papers from the history teacher that he was into principal. Don't even think he went to assistant principal. He went to principal, and Ed Sutt came in as the assistant principal.
Cole Township principal.
Who was the Cole Township principal at the time. So Mal went into principal of the high school, junior, senior high, and Ed Sutt was the assistant principal, junior, senior high. Larry Lockley came to town and took the head wrestling job. George Edwards was really very connected politically. And
George Edwards Sr.
George Edwards Sr. Larry was married to George's daughter,
Yes.
Barb.
Yes.
So I think it was a stepping stone.
So I grew up on Arch and Oak, 2 blocks from Cole Township High School. And in 1961, 62, 63, I was 3, 4, 5 years old. And I would beg my mother to let me outside when the Cole Township students were coming out of school, because I idolized the Cole Township football players, especially the quarterback, number 10, Coach Gubernot. And it's just how things go full circle. Let's transition a little bit. Joe, you started high school in 69 or 68?
I started high school in 68 as a freshman. But before we get into that, this is great listening to these guys. They're a lot older than me and you. I used to
They don't
go
look
watch
older
them
than
play
you.
just like you did. Coach Gubernot and Joe Bordell, when he won the state championship back in those days, correct me if I'm wrong, there was only one state champ. There were no wrestlebacks. I mean, if you were a state champ, you were a state champ.
You had to win 9 in a row.
You didn't have all this wrestlebacks and taking 3 guys to regionals, whatever you guys do with all that stuff. But it was now, back then, you were the champ. And it's not like that anymore. And I'm not, well, that's just the way it is. But
Run the table.
so you guys were my role models, you were. And when I was a little kid, I looked up to you, but now I'm sitting at the table with you now. And,
So talk to us about your early years at Shamokin Area High School.
I was transfig, and then I came into Shamokin area, and I went to 9th grade at the old Township High School. That was where the 8th and 9th graders went. The person maybe that had the biggest impact on me then was a guy by the name of Frank Marcinek, who I ended up working with as a football coach. And Frank was a young guy just out of East Stroudsburg, and he was a little progressive with his techniques and coaching style, and rather than Bernie and Beaners, where they were kind of old school guys. And Frank had all these new things, these new ideas, and like the reaction drill, hit, all this stuff. And Bernie used to, I can still see him over there going, "What the hell is this stuff?"
So did they do the Oklahoma drill?
Yeah, we used to do the Oklahoma
That
drill.
always sticks in my mind.
But as a freshman, my mom would not let me play football, so I ended up going out I ran cross country, and I still get busted about.
I coached the freshman football team, his class, but he wasn't on it.
I didn't play. My mom wouldn't
Chuck
let me.
Yoder and
Jim Lichty, maybe?
Jim Lichty, yep, they were all.
Frank Marcinek ended up
He was not on it.
working on my mom, and she said, "Okay." So I ended up playing my sophomore year JV football, and I had Beaners was the head coach that year, and Bernie was the assistant. Frank Marcinek was there, Ed Zielinski, and I think they were the four. Joe Thoroughway too. Yep, he was there.
What year was Michener at the game? 72, your senior year?
That was later then. I think that was
75, 74,
somewhere,
yeah, Preshlock and those
James
guys.
Michener,
Yeah.
Adventures in Paradise, great author from Philadelphia area. After that year, Bernie retired from coaching, and Joe Thoroughway took over. The Mount Carmel Shamokin game in 1970, we got beat by them, and they had like Hinoski, DeFrancisco, Hawanik, and Hepler, Klaus, a lot of those guys. They were like a Southern team a couple years ago. Like 6 or 7 of them went D1.
They just honored that team. I think they had like 9 Division I players.
They did.
Gary Diminick, Phil Klaus.
Yeah, UCLA, yeah.
And they were an amazing team. A couple years ago, Southern had kind of a similar situation with all these D1 guys. Well, they hired a guy by the name of Tim Montgomery, who was assistant coach at Altoona at the time. He was just out of college, out of Penn State. He was a starting defensive back for Penn State, played for Joe Paterno. He went to Altoona for a year or two, and they offered him the job. And Tim came in. He scared the hell out of me, all of us. And he said, he got all the seniors together. He said, "Guys, I'm taking over. There's going to be a lot of changes and things. And if you don't like it, you can quit."
That dude was gnarly.
He said, I don't need you guys. I'm new here. I don't have to win my first year or whatever. And he said, if you don't follow what I'm doing, then, hit the road.
How many guys did you have to start practice that year? Do you recall?
We might have had like 40.
And when you played your first game, How many were
We
still
were
on the
down
roster?
to like 24 guys.
Yeah, 24, 27, yeah.
And Norge Dork, the coaching staff was Tim, Roger Geis was there, Franny Vitero, Sam Verano. I think he was coaching that year. I think he was, because
Yeah, he kind of teamed up with Tim.
that was the coaching staff.
Why did you lose so many guys?
It was tough. It was tough. Well, one of my teammates was Norm Manny. He graduated. He was on the team, and he stuck it out. He went to the Marine Corps after high school, and when he came back, and we're asking him, how's Bucas? He goes, it was nothing compared to our preseason practice.
Talk about the preseason practices back then.
We had full pads, 3 a day, and they were intense. And we ran our butts off and hit. And and I played college football at Lake Coming, and it was easy. When I went to Lake Coming, it was like, this is a piece of cake compared to what I went through last year. It was easy. Tim put us through the ringer. I mean, it was tough. And some of our guys in our senior class ended up saying, I'm not putting up with this baloney. Yeah. And they ended up quitting. And we went to Tim and said, they were good players too. Yes, we needed them.
I remember.
And we went to Tim and said, Tim, Coach, we need to have these guys if we're going to win. He said, well, I'll tell you what, if you want them that bad, I'll let them back, but they got to come back under my conditions, and they're going to have to pay some penalties, which the penalties were running hills and doing stuff after practice for a half hour, 45 minutes. The only guy that lasted was a guy by the name of Eddie Colton. He ended up sticking it out for like a week or two. They had to do all this stuff after practice. After a couple of days, some of the guys said, I quit. I can't do it. I'm not putting up with this baloney. You know, I don't need it that bad. But there was one guy, Eddie Colton. He ended up sticking it out. One of the other funny things with 24 players, I remember Tim said Norge was a vocational teacher. He taught masonry at the Votech school. He said, Norge, see if you can recruit some kids from the Votech school to come down and play and hold bags and stuff, dummies for us, you know, whatever. Just some of the guys he got down were unbelievable. And they got them in uniforms, and they didn't even know how to put their helmet on right. I'm serious.
They knew how to smoke.
The one loss was because of a teacher strike. We were on a strike, and the coaches would sit up in a house across from the practice field with walkie-talkies while we would practice, and we'd have somebody relaying the plays. And Tim was up there. You could see him up there in a window, like a window like right here, big picture window. And they're all standing watching us, and we're down on that field practicing. But we lost to Shenandoah in a forfeit. We lost to Hazleton, who had a very good team. In fact, Joe Madden, the former manager of the Chicago Cubs, World Series manager, he played on that team. Joe Madden, and we lost to Pottsville. Both games were at home. We go into Shikellamy, and we played a goal line defense the whole time. We ended up beating Shikellamy, and then we went up to Berwick, who had 3 Division I guys, McCutcheon, I forget some of the other guys, but they had a really good team. George Curry was his first year coaching up there, and we went into Berwick, and we beat Berwick. I remember George Curry coming to our locker room after the game at Berwick, and he came over to most of us and shook our hand and said, you guys played a great game, congratulations. I'll never forget that about George Curry, because sometimes George Curry gets a bad rap and stuff, but for the way he coached and what he did, but that was pretty classy for him to come in and do that, because they were heavily favored. And then a couple weeks later, we played in a Thanksgiving Day game, which we hadn't won since the 65 or 16. We ended up winning that game. It was supposed to be played Thanksgiving Day, but we had a foot of snow. I remember having a pep rally up here on the Lincoln Street. We came out, we were inside because it started snowing, and then it was the next morning I woke up, there was like 3 feet of snow. The game was obviously postponed till Saturday, so they had to get trucks and stuff out there, clean the snow off, and we played the game Saturday. There were banks of snow on the sidelines, like 3-4 feet high banks of snow. And when there was a call that the fans didn't like, of course, snowballs were flying all over the place. I can still remember that. And then what I remember about the Mount Carmel guys, and I married a girl from Mount Carmel, and some of her brothers played for football, but they were dirty players, some of those guys, because they were sawdust on the fields from the ruts from the tires, and they would grab the sawdust, get in a 3-point stance, and they would flip it up in your face, There was sawdust all over the place. So if you guys from Mount Carmel listen to it, you know, we still beat you even doing that nonsense.
Yeah,
But
baby.
a lot of them are my buddies now. So,
I was in the house.
but anyway, we ended up winning. We were 8-3.
Yeah, some of the people that have come through Shamokin, you know, Shorty Hitchcock, a world champ in wrestling, you know,
George Chomp.
George Chomp, yeah. Thank you. I think this was,
Thank you, Frank.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I worked at your camps, Frank, for a long time, but I still go down to Duke. I met a lot of friends from.
Let me interrupt.
Yeah.
I know that you were at my camps, and I know that you were at Duke's camps.
I was at a lot.
And I got one
All right.
picture of you where I would say you were actually working. Okay, so
Well, Frank,
you had a perfect attendance record at lunch
He showed up.
and dinner and at BJ's, but as
Yeah.
far as the work, we're not going to go
Frank,
too far with that.
I thought
all
we
right?
were going to start ball busting, but
We are going to ball bust a little bit.
I have some pictures of you doing some performing after.
All right, Joe, let's move on here to.